Good day, I am Alta van der Merwe and I am going to give you an overview of design science research in information systems, and I hope that you find this valuable. So this whole set of slides is based on a paper that we have done in 2019 for the SACLA conference that was captured in the Springer conference proceedings. And the title of the article is Guidelines for Conducting Design Science Research in Information Systems. The co-authors of this paper was Arona Gerber and Hanli Smits. So in the first phase of conducting the systematic literature review, we did a thematic analysis and we came up with 7 different themes: the artifact, the relevance rigor practice theme, the design theory theme, the philosophy, the method, the argument, and the thesis. We then categorized it together, and that was then the artifact, relevance, rigor, practice, and design theory was all categorized into the positioning of the design science research. Then the design of the research project itself, the philosophy and the method, goes into the research design. And then the argument or the thesis that you are going to focus on all go into the communication theme. So from there, we identified 6 different guidelines that you can use while you are busy with a design science research project. The first guidelines is about contextualizing design science research in the field of information systems and be able to distinguish between concepts such as design, design science, and design science research. Secondly, you need to understand the philosophical underpinning of research and the discourse on the nature of design science research. Thirdly, you need to understand where does design science research originate from and look at the works of the pioneers in the field. Then you need to focus on the role of the artifact in design science research and the different views on design theory. Fifthly, you need to select an appropriate design science research method for execution of your research study. And then lastly, think about how you're going to communicate your research done in design science research, for instance, in a thesis. So now I'm going to look at the different guidelines, each of them individually. The first guideline is to contextualize design science research in the field of information systems and be able to distinguish between concepts such as design, design science, and design science research. Here, Gregory argues that in doing design, one is creating something that does not exist. And there are 2 important things that happens during a design science research project. Firstly, it is the creation of something, namely the artifact itself, and then it is the process of creation. So when you do your design science research project, you need to understand what are you creating, what is it that you are creating, what is the artifact, and then secondly, what is the process that you are using to create this artifact. So, as she argues, design is therefore both a noun and a verb, or a product and a process. Then there's 2 different things that you need to understand while you are doing design science research. You need to understand what is the difference between the design itself and a design theory. It's not the same. A design focuses on the use of scientific principles, technical information, and imagination in the definition of a structure, machine, or system to perform pre-specified functions with the maximum economy and efficiency. So you are in the process of creating something when you are doing design. While design theory is a prescriptive theory telling us how a design process can be carried out. An example of a design theory is, for instance, the waterfall model. That tells us exactly how we're going to do a design, and that is a design theory. So in this slide, we focus on different views of design science research or ways that people describe design science. And the first one is Cross, that talks about the systematic approach, so the procedure that you need to follow. Then Bayezid focus on the fact that the artifact that we are creating is something that is a man-made thing. It's not a natural resource. Hefner himself focused more on the practical nature of design science research, where he talks about design science as fundamentally a problem-solving paradigm. He also talks about the solution to wicked problems. In design science research, the milestone that we talk about is in 2004, when Hefner presented their framework for IS research and guidelines for design science research. In their work, they refer to design science research as a paradigm where the knowledge and understanding of a problem domain and solution are achieved in the building and application of the designed artifact. So as you can see, there's a very big focus on the building and the application and the use of the artifact. More or less in the same time, also Vaishnavi, Kugler, and Petner started a website focusing on design science and research in IS. And according to them, design science research uses a set of synthetic and analytical techniques and perspectives for performing research in IS. So now we're going to look at the second guideline, where we talk about the understanding of the philosophical underpinning of research and the discourse on the nature of design science research. So in IS, research conducted is mostly multidisciplinary, and the philosophies mostly used is either positivist, interpretivist, or critical research. In the papers reviewed, 3 discourses emerge, including design science research as a paradigm, traditional paradigms, and pragmatism as a paradigm. So in the following 3 slides, I'm going to look at the different ways that the philosophies were used by different people and viewed. And the first one is where the design science research is seen by a paradigm, and that was mainly by people like Vaishnavi, Kugler, and Petter, where they discussed design science research as a paradigm on its own. The initial ideas were shared on a website hosted by Desrus and later replicated in a book where they contrast interpretivism, positivism, and design science research in tabular form. You can still access the website at the AIS resources, and here you can see how they have looked at the ontology, epistemology, methodology, and axiology of design as a philosophy on its own. The second view is where people are using traditional paradigms within design science research. So there, for instance, you can use interpretivism or positivism as your stance when you are doing your design. And depending on the design itself, whether you are creating it, it might be interpretivism or positivism when you are testing the artifact itself for the applicability and how it is working. So Gregory claims that design science research is conducted most frequently within a positivistic epistemological perspective, while Venable proposes a framework for understanding design research where the framework focuses on theory building as well as evaluation of the solutions from a positivist or interpretivist angle. The third one, and this is also the one that I support, is more where we talk about pragmatism as a paradigm for design science research. Marsh and Smith were some of the first authors to emphasize pragmatism when they argued that truth is what works in practice. Hefner devoted the closure of his article in 2007 to claiming pragmatism as the nature of design science research. His view of pragmatism is a school of thought that considers practical consequences or real effects to be vital components of both meaning and truth. And then a third meaningful resource on the nature of design science research is the paper by Godkill. In this seminal work, he investigates the epistemological foundation for design science research and argues that the pragmatist perspective is a fit for design science research based on the focus of utility and knowledge growth through the development, starting with a problematic situation and aiming for knowledge building. So the whole pragmatism as a paradigm is focused on the practical nature of developing the artifact and the value that it has in practice. Deng, in a recent work, argues that pragmatism is the underpinning philosophy for design science research but goes through different phases where the researcher is involved as interpretivist, positivist, and constructive observer or intervener. If you look at the different ways that he has his cycles, he talks about the constructive intervener, then you can be a positivist observer, interpretive observer, and you go through these cycles. And this is the nature of pragmatism of the whole project, but you can have different other perspectives while you are doing your research. So the most frequently cited work in IS is the work of Simon, where he argues for the acceptance of the study and development of artificial or man-made objects. And this is important because the artifact that we are creating is a man-made object. And therefore, that was the pioneering work that started in the late 60s, early 70s. This was the seminal work from Hefner et al. Was in 2004, where they contrasted behavioral science and design science against one another. And in 2019, there was more or less 11,400 citations to date on this piece of work, where they presented a framework for IS research and also provided a set of guidelines for design science research. For any student involved in the work of design science research, it's important that you understand the framework presented by Hefner in 2004, Hefner et al. And the two concepts that leads this whole model is the relevance and the rigor, where the relevance focus on what is important in practice. On the left-hand side, it is about people, organizations, and technologies, and this feed your problem. This is the business need that you have that you start out with. Then on the right-hand side, you have your rigor, your foundations and your methodologies. What is known about the problem and what is the applicable knowledge that can be used. These two things feed into the development and the building of the artifact, where you are using existing theories to build your artifact that is the solution for the business need. There's a cycle in the middle where you develop, you build, you justify and you evaluate. And then at the end, you give back to practice where you fulfill the business need. And you also should then give back to theory where you are going to present your result either as a design theory or as an applicable artifact that has certain elements that can be captured as in the knowledge base. Hefner also gave in his 2004 paper 7 guidelines when conducting design science research, where he talks firstly about the artifact, then the relevance of the problem, the evaluation of the design, the contribution of the research, the rigor of the research, the design as a search process, and the communication of the research. Some of the other works that you should consult when you are busy with design science research are March et al., Walson, Nunemacher, Gregor and Jones, Gregor and Hefner, Cross, Marker et al. I listed here for you in the left-hand side just the number of citations so that you can see which of these are the most popular works and which have been cited a lot. So these are definitely works that you should include in your reading when you are involved in design science research. Guideline number 4 focuses on the artifact and design science research and the different views on design theory. So the first mention of different types of artifacts is by Marsh and Smith that talked about constructs, models, methods, and implementations. Ross and Sine added better theories. Winter gives examples of constructs that include modeling primitives implemented by meta models of modeling tools, process models, workflows as models, and project methods. Perot claimed in 2002 that the artifact created in design science research is a software or a system, but that can fall under the implementations of Marsh and Smith. Hefner and Chattery and Vaishnavi et al. Also gives examples of the artifact algorithms, human-computer interfaces, languages, and system design methodologies. Furthermore, Offerman et al. Did a literature review, and they had created a topology with 8 types of artifacts, including system design, method, language notation, algorithm, guideline, requirements, pattern, and metric. Winter later then once again emphasized theories as an artifact, and Baskerville also talks about design theories as an artifact. In general, we can categorize then all artifacts into 5 types. Either a construct that can be used in models, for example, information systems use, a model, which can be a pictorial or graphic representation of key concepts. A model shows the relationship between various types of variables, e.g. independent, dependent, moderating, mediating variables, etc. You can have a method, which is a particular procedure for accomplishing or approaching something. You can have an implementation, which can be the process of putting a decision or plan into effect, execution, a system, and then a design theory, which is a prescriptive theory. In general, all types of artifacts can be categorized as one of these 5. Now, our 5th guideline that we identified is to focus on the creation of the artifact, and that is the building and the evaluation of the artifact itself. For that, you need a process. And this is in the middle of Hefner's model, where you create the artifact and you justify and evaluate the artifact. And here you can have different methodologies that you can follow. So all the methods shared in the literature on conducting design science research consist of a combination of the general design and development phases, namely identification, design, development, and testing. Vaishnavi et al. Published one of the often used and referenced methods that they called a design science research process model, and that was based on work that was originated by Takeda et al. Their process starts with awareness of the problem, the suggestion what you are going to do to get the solution for the problem, the development of the artifact, and then you have the option at that stage to have a circumscription where you contribute to the knowledge and go back into the awareness of the problem, suggestion, development, or you can go into evaluation where you then have a circumscription, which is the contribution and a conclusion at the end of the day. The outputs include a proposal for the awareness of the problem, a tentative design for the suggestion, the artifact for during the development, some performance measures for the evaluation, and the results. Another popular design science research process model used by authors is the work published by Pries et al. In their process model, in the design science research cycles through problem identification, motivation, objective of solution, design and development, demonstration, evaluation. As you can see from their model, they start with the identification of the problem and the motivation. They define the objectives of the solution. They go into design and development, demonstrate, do the evaluation, and the communication. As part of your design, the evaluation is very important, and here some of the pioneers working in this field were Pries-Hele, Baskerville and Venable, who published a framework for evaluation in design science, or the FETS model. Important in their model is they have 4 different possible strategies that you can use during your testing, namely the quick and simple strategy, the human risk and effectiveness evaluation strategy, the technical risk and efficacy evaluation strategy, and the purely technical artifact strategy. They then continue to provide a 4-step process for choosing an approach for a particular design science research, namely explicate the goals of the evaluation, choose the evaluation strategy or strategies, determine the properties to be evaluated, and design the individual evaluation episode. So now we get to guideline number 6, which talks about the communication of the research and how do you reflect on what you have done and how do you present it, for instance, in a thesis. So Greger and Hefner gave an overview on publishing an article in Design Science Research, in which they proposed a publication schema for recording results. And they argue that there are 4 questions that you need to ask. Are the problems discussed in the paper of substantial interest? Are the problems solved or a contribution is made to the solution? Are the methods new? And whether the paper supports understanding of the area of research. But they didn't talk about the thesis itself. So in 2017, Van der Merwe et al. Described a method that the student can use to write a thesis according to the steps proposed by Vaishnavi et al. And they argue that the introduction and literature review of a thesis maps to the awareness phase. The literature review and research design map to the suggestion phase. The research design and body of the thesis give an overview of the development, while the body of the thesis should also report on the evaluation phase, and lastly, the conclusion will then also be handled in the conclusion of the thesis. The paper reference is here. It was done by Van der Merwe, Gerber and Smits, and the title is Mapping a Design Science Research Cycle to the Postgraduate Research Report, and that was in the Springer publication. So the structure of a research report according to this method talks about the introduction, where you focus on the awareness and the suggestion. The literature review of the thesis will then include the awareness of the problem and a suggestion. The method section of the thesis will focus already on the beginning of the development. The body will include the development and the evaluation. And the conclusion of the thesis will also conclude Vaishnavi's cycle. An example of scenario 1, which is just a mapping, is where you can see in chapter 1, you will have your introduction and already an awareness and some suggestions. In your chapter 2, you will have your literature on what is existing, and here you will already have an indication of what is needed, and that maps to the awareness. So in your research design is where you do your design. Then you go into your development into chapter 4 and 5, and your evaluation or proof of concept was done here in chapter 6. And then your conclusion in chapter 7. But what is very important from Vaishnavi and also from Peffers and the other models is that you can have a flow back from any of the phases, either from the development or from the evaluation. And that means that you can have multi-cycles where you can have more than one section of the artifact developed. Here is an example of how you map this now to multiple cycles of design, where you will start with the awareness, go into suggestions, start with your development, and then you can have spin-offs of more than one cycle or sub-cycle. An example of this is here where you can see the chapter map for a thesis, where the student started with the main cycle, the awareness and the suggestion and development. And then from his development, he moved out and went into different cycles. First, once again, awareness, suggestion, development, evaluation cycle. Cycle 2, awareness, suggestion, development. Cycle 3, awareness, suggestion, development. And cycle 4. When he was finished with all his different cycles, he came back and then he did his main evaluation. Another example where you can see where the student started with the awareness of the problem, suggestion, go into development, and then had 3 sub-cycles, sub-cycle 1, 2, and 3, come back, and then did your evaluation at the end of the day. Thank you for listening to the slides. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact me. My email address is alta@up.ac.za. Thank you.